Chapter 1. An Invitation to Imouth. There are few things Hercule enjoyed less than leisure, for leisure's sake. While I have often dreamed of lazy days spent fishing or playing golf, my brilliant friend approached idleness with the same distaste one might reserve for lukewarm tea or an untidy tie. And yet there we were, sequestered in a modest inn near the Hercule coast. It was early spring, and the North Sea wind made walking a rather bracing ordeal, but it was good for his system. Nervous he was, wrapped as always in several layers of immaculately pressed clothing, and a thick overcoat with a velvet collar. As for me, I found myself wishing for a third pair of socks. It was on our second morning there that the letter arrived. The innkeeper, a shy lad who addressed Poirot as Mr. Parrot, brought it to our breakfast table, along with a rack of toast and a frown. The envelope bore a peculiar detail that caught my eye. A small water stain in the upper corner, as if it had been learned and marked, handled with wet fingers. Poirot opened the envelope with the daintiness of a surgeon. The stationery was thick-edged in silver and bore a rather noble-looking crest, 2 rampant lions flanking a single sheath of barley. But it was what Poirot noticed that made him pause, a faint impression in the paper, as if someone had written on a sheet above it, with considerable pressure. "From Lady Frances Cavendish," he said softly, holding the paper to the light of Linthill House, "but observe Hastings. She has written this letter twice. See here, the ghost of different words. Aced. Invisible letters with his finger. The first draft was more urgent, shall we say. Surely not both at once," I said lightly, reaching for the marmalade. Poirot ignored my humor entirely. "You do not find it curious, mon ami, that a lady of the Scottish aristocracy writes not to invite me to speak to lecture, or even to consult, but rather to attend her as a guest in a time of grave unease?" His eyes glittered with interest. "And look here, lest the past awaken and demand payment in blood. Ah, mon vieux, this is not a holiday, this is a summons, and someone has made her very afraid indeed."
An hour later, we were in a hired motor car, driving along winding coastal roads toward Imouth. The cliffs loomed high, the sea below restless and gray. I had seldom seen such a dramatic landscape, nor one so clearly suited to tales of old crimes and restless ghosts. Linthill House soon rose before us, a grand manor, its sandstone facade straight with ivy and age. It stood on a bluff above the sea, its windows narrow and tall like watchful eyes. The drive was lined with yew trees, and the air had that sharp, coppery tang I've only ever noticed near places touched by history or death.
But it was the grounds that first struck Poirot as odd. Regard the gardens Hastings recently disturbed earth near the east wing and see there, fresh gravel on the path, but only leading to one door. Someone has been expecting visitors, or perhaps hiding evidence of them.
We were greeted at the great door by a woman, I guess to be in her late 50s. Lady Frances Cavendish had an air of restrained
Elegance dressed in greys and silvers, as if she too had been pulled from a painting. Her manner was cool but courteous, and she offered her hand to Poirot without hesitation. But I noticed her gloves. Fine leather but with a small tear at the thumb, hastily mended. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice carrying just the faintest tremor. "You have come. I feared you might not." Lady Frances Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "Your letter. It intrigued me considerably. particularly the urgency that required you to write it twice. A flicker of surprise crossed her features, so brief I might have missed it. I wanted to be precise in my words. She led us into the drawing room. The ceilings were high, the wallpaper of faded damask, and the windows framed the churning sea below. A fire crackled, but the air still carried a slight dampness, as if the house had been too long without warmth. On the mantelpiece sat 4 silver-framed photographs and 1 painted portrait, but the portrait's frame was turned face down. "Tell me, madame," Poirot said, once tea had been served, "what troubles you so deeply?" Lady Frances looked at him for a long moment. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set down her teacup, but not from nerves. I realized there was a small bandage on her index finger, barely visible beneath her glove. "3 days ago," she said finally, "I received this." She reached into her reticule and withdrew a folded piece of paper. It was slipped under my door during the night. Poirot examined the note carefully. In block letters someone had written, "The truth will come out. Justice for Lady Margaret. You have 7 days." "Disturbing," Poirot murmured. "And this prompted your letter to me?" "That and other things. You see, Poirot, Lady Margaret Hume, a distant relation of mine, died in this house on the 13th of August, 1751. She was murdered." I straightened slightly. This was more than idle superstition. "She was found at the foot of the main staircase," Lady Frances continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "A noble woman of great means. She had recently changed her will. That very day, in fact, they said she tripped. But before she died, she told the maid, 'He did this to me. The 13th step, remembers? And nothing more.'" Poirot's eyes sharpened like a blade. "The 13th step, an unusual detail to remember in one's dying moments. None she was slipping into, death. Perhaps she was delirious, perhaps, or perhaps she was leaving a message for those with the wit to understand it." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, madame, how many steps are there on your main staircase?" Frances hesitated. 15. "There have always been 15. Alors, how can you be so certain it was murder?" Frances's expression turned grave. She rose and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. "Because now, Poirot, someone else is in danger." The note was not the first sign. Strange whispers in the night, locked doors found open, portraits turned to the wall. She gestured almost unconsciously toward the mantelpiece. "And last week, one of the staff was found outside in the night. No memory of how she got there. Her hand bleeding as if from a defensive wound, just like mine." She pulled off her glove, revealing a deeper cut than the small bandage had suggested. "This happened 2 nights ago. I was walking the corridors, unable to sleep, when I heard voices, hushed, urgent. I followed the sound to the north wing, but when I tried to listen at the door, something struck it from the other side. A piece of the old stonework fell and caught my hand." Bond murmured, "Poirot, but why call me? Why not the local authorities? What makes you believe this is connected to events from centuries past?" Lady Frances turned from the window, her face pale in the firelight. "Because I believe the one who killed Margaret walks among us still, or their blood does, and I fear history is preparing to repeat itself. Someone has been searching the house, Miss Poirot, searching for something that was hidden long ago. The note proves they're close to finding it. There was a silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then Poirot stood, dusting an invisible speck from his sleeve. "Madame, it would be my honor to investigate this matter, but first, may I see the portrait?" Francis stiffened. It's nothing of importance, an old family portrait." "Ah, but in my experience, madame, it is precisely the nothing that proves to be everything." Reluctantly, she turned the frame. The painted portrait showed a young woman in 18th-century dress, standing beside the very staircase where Lady Margaret had died. But it was the woman's face that caught my attention. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features, though I could not place why. "Who is she?" Poirot asked quietly. "Margaret's ward, Eliza Grant. The portrait was painted just before she disappeared." As we were shown to our rooms, I could not help but glance up the grand staircase. The same one, I realized with a shiver, where Lady Margaret Hume had met her end all those years ago. Poirot paused at the 13th step, running his fingers along the edge. "Curious, Hastings. This step has been replaced. The wood is newer, the grain different. Someone wanted to erase whatever the 13th step remembered.